All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome in to another episode of DND's Dynamite 80s. I'm DH.
I'm DC.
And DC, we have a special guest today. Let you go ahead and introduce.
Yes, we do. Very special guest joining us from Scotland. We'd like to welcome Kevin Patterson from Fiction Factory. Hi, Kevin. How are you? Can you hear us?
Hey, I'm not too bad. Thank you for inviting me on to talk about a great decade of music. Well done for tracking me down. As we say in Scotland, I'm a bit of a sleek-it beastie, so you don't see me very often. Thank you for inviting me on.
Yeah, actually, how that happened was I read an article on Fiction Factory, and the gentleman, I guess, had gotten some comments from you and had mentioned in the piece where you were working. So I just happened to come across an article.
Oh, okay.
Let me ask you, starting out with this, how did you get interested in music, and what age?
Well, I think there are probably you'll understand that I do tend to rabbit on a little bit, as we would say in Scotland. So you'll get probably quite a lot from me. I guess it would be two parts to that answer. One is maybe where music is a wonderful language that you can listen to and feel joy or sadness or excitement or any of the other emotions that people like you and I feel who love music, and then there's the aspect where it's music as a thing that you do. And I think for the first one, my mum always seemed to have the radio on, or she would often come home with a new single that she'd bought from the shops, and we'd sit down and we'd listen to it. And usually play it 4 or 5 times back to back. And growing up in the 60s, with hindsight, I guess you're spoiled for choice. Everything sounds good, or it's interesting. And of course, I think pop music was turning into this kind of great art form, if you like. And I think in the case of music as a thing that you do, that was probably much more of a sliding doors moment, really by chance. I think I was about 15, quite clever at school, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I definitely wasn't going to do anything with music. But one day I came across my friends, and they were talking about just getting together to play, just for fun. And then as tends to happen, other people joined the conversation. And before you knew it, there was, 7 or 8 people all talking about starting a band. Now I couldn't play anything, but this sounded exciting, and I didn't want to be left out. So I said that I wanted to join them, and they said, well, that's brilliant. What can you play? And then I told them I couldn't play anything. I didn't have an instrument. I couldn't sing. I don't think I was awfully high on the list of people who might stick around for very long after that. But I would say that really from the first moment that I picked up a bass guitar, which is what I started on, I can't explain it, but I just knew music was the thing that I wanted to do, and it was a thing that I felt really strongly that I would do something with, and I can't explain it. It sounds a little bit arrogant, but I just had that conviction that I was going to do something.
Awesome. What was the motivation behind the writing of Feels Like Heaven?
Yeah, I think musically, it's probably a distillation of a couple of things. There's a very, very early memory from the 60s of the Walker Brothers, and they had a single called "Make It Easy on Yourself," and that really caught my ear at the time for some reason, which I think is kind of weird, because I was thinking about this when you asked me on, and I think I could have only been about 5 or 6 when it was released, but it really, really resonated. So that's certainly one, and that's probably the low vocal that I have in the verse. That's and the sort of drama of the song, I guess, is a good part of it. And then kind of fast forward to maybe the mid 70s, I think, and there's a really obvious influence in the chorus. For a couple of years, maybe 3 years, I was completely obsessed with a band called Sparks, and the singer Russell Mael has a very quirky voice. Not the greatest singer, but his falsetto was really something that stuck with me, really, deep down. And it was the first, I think, falsetto voice that I'd heard in pop, where I thought, that's really interesting. And it obviously stuck, because when you've written a chorus that needs a killer melody, and Sparks and Russell Mael's falsetto are in your head and your soul, then there's only one direction that melody is going to go in, and it's all the way up. So musically, I think both of those. Lyrically, I think it's maybe a little bit more convoluted, but it underlines something that I was really quite intrigued by at the time. I remember this idea that a song can sound like one thing, but the lyrics make it mean something else. So Feels Like Heaven isn't actually written as a love song. It's written as a song of intense dislike, I think you could say.
Wow.
Really of a relationship that's gone wrong, and it feels like heaven when the other person isn't there. But of course now I see it featured on 80s love songs albums, and I shake my head and I think to myself, Kevin, you were just too clever for your own good.
Yes. Now, understanding that, I've been married for 32 years, so I can play that for my wife and get bonus points and really know what it means.
Kevin, let me ask you this. When the band got the call or whatever to be on Top of the Pops, what did that really do for you guys?
Oh, it was really difficult to describe. I always describe it a little bit like we were rehearsing for a tour, and we were rehearsing in a bar. The owner we knew, and we got a phone call because we had released Feels Like Heaven. And we kind of felt that it was going to do something, but we didn't really know what. And we were rehearsing for a tour, and then we got a phone call to say, you need to get on a plane down to London because you're going to be on Top of the Pops on Thursday, which in those days is what happened. You would go down to be on the show, but it was massive historically and culturally. For the UK, there was nothing like it anywhere. Yes, it was a music show that happened every week, but Britain is, at that time, 50 million people, and for a good part of Top of the Pops history, the BBC, which is the station that it was shown on, was really the only station, and so it's difficult to describe to people. There is nothing like it, and at the time there was nothing like it, where the whole family, maybe 8, 9, 10 million people would all sit down and watch this program together, and they would the parents would tut at the television and look at what he's wearing, and was that a boy or a girl, but it was a real social thing. They would, families would talk about music. They would criticize, and it was just one of those cultural things that can never be repeated, I think, with binge watching that we have nowadays.
Right.
Yes, there were other music shows that you could go on, but because of all the history and the culture, Top of the Pops was the only one that you could go on that would actually say to people, to your friends, relations, and your family that this was you. You've arrived
Oh, wow.
musically, and this was something that happened for half an hour every week, literally for decades. So culturally, I don't suppose it's so much now, but certainly for my generation, it was ingrained in you that if you wanted to show that you had made it, Top of the Pops was the place to be on.
Right.
And so all of us in the band, when we were growing up, appearing on Top of the Pops was the thing, and you would know other musicians in other bands, and anyone that said to you, "Oh, Top of the Pops, you're selling out, man. You don't want to be on that." I'm absolutely telling you, if they had the chance to go on it, they would have bitten your hand off to be on it. So it was really that kind of thing. There is nothing like it. There was nothing like it. And obviously for me, it was a sign to my mum and dad that really I hadn't wasted the previous 8 years of my life. And that maybe music was that proper job that they wanted me to get. Parents are always on about, oh, you want to get a proper job.
Sure.
But at least that showed them that there was something. And sadly, 1984, which was the year that Feels Like Heaven was in the charts and across Europe as well, that was a real high point at the start for me. But unfortunately, my mum died in the August of that year. But I like to think that wherever she is, if there's a heaven or an afterlife, that at least she saw me on Top of the Pops. And for all she knows, I'm a global superstar.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let me ask this, because this is very curious to me. I want your opinion of this, and you kind of led me to ask this question. Why do you think so many talented folks like yourself in the UK and groups in the UK come out in the 80s that they did? Is there an emphasis in the music in schools, or I'm just blown away with the talent?
Yeah, it's. I think, I think everybody will have their own opinion, but I think that there isn't, and with me, you're not going to get a simple one-line answer. I don't think there is a simple answer to that. We weren't breathing special air or drinking magic water, or there's no special emphasis on music in school. I mean, I dropped music as soon as I could in school, because the school that I was at, it was dreadfully taught. It was really boring, and I just don't have good memories of it. So I dropped it as soon as I could as a subject. I think it all starts in the 1950s and the 1960s with immigration and the diversity of cultures that brings. And of course, just like me, a lot of 80s artists were born in the first half of the 60s. And, if you're listening to the radio, 1 minute you might be listening to The Who or the Stones, and the next you might just as easily hear some weird novelty record or reggae or ska or just weird stuff. So, I think that all goes into the brain and goes into the fabric of your being, if you like. And then, mid 70s, and punk came along, and it was a cultural phenomenon. Here were people telling you that you can do this, you do it yourself, you don't need anyone to give you permission. And at the same time, there was a lot of social upheaval. Industries were being destroyed, and people were being put out of work, and young people couldn't get a job. And you can turn that energy negatively. But in the UK at the time, because of all of that, there was a whole state industry established to manage unemployment. And I think that it's an unacknowledged fact that the reason for such a burst of creativity from really the mid-70s through almost to the end of the 80s is because the UK state subsidised young people like myself to be creative if you wanted to be. You didn't get much to live on, but you did get what they called social security. And if you were that way inclined and you just thought, I got to do something, then that's how you did it. And I think it was the UK government, I think, ultimately,
Wow.
because they gave you that breathing space to be creative. And I did have jobs, and I would have any amount of jobs, but I did have periods of unemployment, and it was tough to live on.
Mm-hmm.
But without that, I wouldn't have had the time and the space to be able to write, really.
I found it really interesting because one of the questions I had was what particular genre of music influenced you? Because as I listen to the different songs, I can kind of pick up some reggae in some songs, just vast differences. And hearing that explanation, I'm like, okay, I get it now. Your group has such a unique sound.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I enjoy listening to it. I actually spent some more time today just sitting back while I was working and listening to it. It's just such an enjoyable sound. And just understanding that those various genres had influence on you that really comes to light in your music.
Thank you for that. I think it's important even now, and my son, and not so much my daughter, but my son is a sort of mid-teenager, and he keeps me young in listening to sort of more up-to-date stuff. And I think it's, I think certainly as a musician, as a songwriter, it's important to, I think, keep open to these kinds of influences. Sometimes I regret that Fiction Factory wasn't more of a definite thing. There was a definite direction to the songs, because you're right, there is a variation to the songs, but that is absolutely because of when I was growing up as a child. We would listen to everything, and I think now that's something that I still do. And I was thinking about it the other day, that Spotify and streaming services kind of make it, they've kind of modified how people listen to things now. Where before, you and I, we would buy records which had sides. We would put the needle down, and we would listen to side A, and we would listen to it all the way through. And if you were skilled, you could figure out where to drop the needle.
Right.
And, you'd get
particular
it roughly
area,
right. Yeah. But nowadays it's there isn't any of that. Music's presented to you as a list, and I'm as guilty as anyone. I will look at the list and I will pick from the list. It's not a linear thing anymore. So it's great, but it has modified, I think, how people consume music. So it's a real pressure, I think, for not just musicians, but also for the listener. If a musician or a band comes up with a few, maybe not their best songs, that can nowadays that can lose people, and you kind of drift off. And I was thinking about it because I thought, well, maybe you'll ask me what is it that I listen to at the moment, and really I don't think I can say that there's a particular artist who I think, oh yeah, they're really good. I really like the first album, second album not so much, third album, yeah. Like you would in the 80s or the 70s, right. Or I think it's much easier to pick and choose. And so in a way that's kind of sad, that the following is much more fragmented, and fandom is much more fragmented and much more fickle, because you know there are a few songs that you will like from an artist, but you know the rest people will discount, and that's maybe why a lot of these 80s revival festivals are so popular. I'm doing a festival, sort of like a touring festival, later on this year,
Yes.
and that's just full of artists who are asked to do 1 or 2 or 3 numbers. The headliners, they'll do maybe more of a full set, and I can get that. You know, I suppose in the 80s you're sort of starting off seeing that, where it's one song here or one song there.
Mhm.
I'm not quite sure when the classic albums kind of finished. I certainly had a few artists that I enjoyed listening to, but that I think kind of stopped early 80s, mid 80s maybe. And that is, I think, when you know you have, I don't know if you get it in America, but you have all the Now albums. Now that's what I call music.
Yes,
We were on
Absolutely.
Now,
Yes.
Now, yeah. So we were on Now too, and it's gone up to
okay.
whatever
Yeah.
now 140
right.
or whatever. So
100 plus
that's become-
volumes. Yeah.
Yes. but you know that's become really popular, and you know we'll appear. It Feels Like Heaven will appear on you know lots of albums, and it'll pop up on you know Netflix and various TV series and whatever. So that's great. But you know, streaming and that side of things I think has really changed how people appreciate and consume music. It's more of a pick and mix now, and you'll get people liking songs and not so much the artists. And I'm kind of torn by that. I've always said that I prefer it, you know, when I'm no longer here, that nobody will remember Fiction Factory, but they'll remember Feels Like Heaven, because it's the, you know, for me it's the song. You know, none of us were great lookers. I'm sure we were never pinned up on anybody's wall. You know, it's always been the song for me. Songs that have been the important thing. Don't really care if anybody remembers Fiction Factory, but I do care a lot if people remember the song. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of torn, because it fits in with my feel that it's the song that's important. It's not the artist. But yeah, you know, streaming and all that kind of stuff has changed, I think, how people consume music now, and it's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing. I think it's just different. It's you know, it's like when you know, I'm speaking to my friends and they go, oh well, music's not as good as it was. You know, it was much better in the 90s or the 80s or the 70s or whatever. And I don't agree. It's just different. You know, it's of its time.
Right. Well, that answered a lot of my questions.
I usually do.
That was pretty
You just
much
have to
my
ask one.
follow-up questions.
It's a bit like a hand grenade. You just drop in the one question and I'll answer them all.
Yeah, that was perfect. I really appreciate it. Again, DC, you have
Thank
anything?
you.
I think I'm great. Kevin,
Kevin,
we
I
really appreciate your time.
Really do appreciate your time.
That's okay.
And like I said, you know, we appreciate you taking the time on the show. Enjoyed the interview. And folks, again, Kevin Patterson, Fiction Factory. If you haven't listened to their music, check
You
it out.
better
All
listen
over
to their
YouTube.
music.
You really want to
Absolutely.
listen to it.
Absolutely. Kevin, we wish you well. Thank
Yes,
you so
wish
much
well.
for your
Thank you so
time.
much. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to
Thank you. You
conclude
too.
another episode of D&D Dynamite 80s. DC, great job. Kevin,
Absolutely.
great job. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Folks,
All right.
we'll see you next time.
We'll see you next time.
All right.
Thank you.
Kevin, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Have a good day.
Cheers. Thank you.